Today's program is entitled Prehistoric Race Cover-Up. The article that I will be narrating is entitled The Bowels of the Earth, Discovery of an Immense Subterranean Cavern in San Diego, California. A prehistoric race found in coffins that were chiseled out of solid stone. A cave of crystals under the bed of the San Diego, California Bay. The date was January 1st, 1888. The story was published by the San Diego Union and written by columnist reporter Charles F. Degelman. Nearly a month earlier, a reporter of the Union obtained from an eminent visiting scientist the full particulars of a wonderful discovery made by him in the earth underneath San Diego. Before revealing the details of the discovery, the scientist extracted a solemn promise that the matter should not be made public until he gave his permission. The reason for the secrecy were recognized as valid. The news, however, is of such tremendous importance that every means has been exerted in the last few weeks to obtain permission for its publication. This was finally secured, and the wonderful story is now given to the public. Professor Robert E. Stearns, paleontologist of the United States Geological Survey and curator of mollusks of the United States National Museum, who recently visited San Diego of a geological nature, returned to the headquarters of his bureau at Washington a few weeks ago. Professor Stearns is a very prominent scientist, and the published accounts of his researches in the special direction to which he has devoted his life has made him a high authority among geologists all over the world. When it was learned after his arrival that he intended to confine his researches to one locality, much surprise was expressed to what was his true mission. Learning of this state of affairs, a reporter of the Union interviewed Professor Stearns during the early part of his visit to this city. By reference to the interview published in the Union of October 11th, 1887, it will be seen that nothing of importance was learned at that time, but upon being pressed, the professor admitted that he was engaged in researches of tremendous interest and importance. The professor promised that if he was successful, would make some revelations of an important character to the reporter. He was true to his promise, and a few days before his departure, a messenger informed the scribe that the professor wished to see him in his room immediately. There the gray-haired scientist was found, and it could easily be seen by his actions that he was in a state of ecstatic enthusiasm. The professor goes on to say, "Since coming here, I have made an important discovery. This discovery is the triumph of my scientific career. I have spent 40 years in close and painful study, and as a result have written many works that which have brought me distinction among scientists, but all this is dwarfed with insignificance by the discovery that I have just made. Hence, I came here from Washington 3 weeks ago, and enlisting in my service a resident scientific worker who was quite familiar with the whole country, I explained my mission, and together we went to work in earnest. Within the last few days, our labors have been rewarded with complete success." The opening of the cave not revealed. "I shall not give you a complete history of our labors," he continued. "I do not wish to make this information public at this time. I do not wish to reveal where the opening to this cave can be found. After we discovered its location, we had little labor or difficulty in gaining access to it. The spot is secluded, and we went about our work with little fear of being observed. One day, while my co-worker was digging, the ground suddenly gave way under his feet, and if I had not been quick in lending him a hand, he would have fallen into a large aperture in the earth. We immediately ceased work. Although it was still early in the day, we hastily made the usual preparations and started for home. After resting the remainder of the day, I was determined to explore the cave that night. For the purpose of our trip, my companion procured 4 coal oil torches, several balls of stout twine, a quantity of rope, 2 heavy canes, and some waterproof clothing. The rope we intended to use for lowering ourselves into holes, but we found little use for it. At about 8 o'clock, we were on the ground and began operations. The hole into which my companion fell proved to be a sloping aperture down which we easily descended using a great caution and feeling our way inch by inch. Descending about 60 feet, we found ourselves in the midst of a series of very irregular openings. The foundation was much broken, and there seemed to be innumerable blocks of earth and rock thrown together. On the examination, I found that these immense fragments were portions of the ancient bed of the ocean, and there I immediately understood the situation. In the cave, we sloped downward, where we discovered the mouth of the cave. Peering around the labyrinth in which I found myself, I was at first puzzled to know which way to proceed, but finally determined to follow the general direction in which I knew the cave must run. After securing one end of a ball of twine to a rock, began to climb down among the openings. We had proceeded about 1,200 feet when order began to be apparent. The flare of our torches lit up the narrow openings through which we passed, but suddenly we discovered a scene of splendor. For a moment, my companion and I were speechless. We were astonished at the grandeur and magnificence displayed around us. Aladdin could have scarcely have been more surprised when we touched his lamp and suddenly found himself in the midst of a gorgeous palace. We hurried forward and soon found ourselves in a part of the cave that was curiously regular in form. It was round, and the reflected colors of the crystal ceiling made it appear like the interior of a stained glass dome. Here the little stream flowed into a bowl-like basin, as smooth and regular in shape as it had been rimmed out of the solid white rock by hand of man. In its clear waters, innumerable darting fish could be seen. I made as close an inspection as I could and found that they were sightless fish, such as one found in underground caverns. After leaving this pool, we traveled for a great distance, perhaps more than 2 miles, where we began to note a change in the character of the surroundings. Continuing further, the crystal forms became smaller and less numerous. I was convinced that we had reached a point beyond the bay and under some portion of the city of San Diego. To give a rough guess, I should say we were beneath some portion of 5th or 6th Streets, perhaps near the post office. Of course, all sense of direction is lost in wandering through such an underground labyrinth, and I'd be hundreds of feet out of the way in my calculations. It is safe to say, however, that we were somewhere beneath the region bounded by 4th and 9th Streets on the east and west, and East Street and 11th Streets on the north and south. I am particular because at this point I made a most astounding and, to me, wholly unexpected discovery. The tops and sides of this cavern were hung with sparkling crystals. The discovery did not surprise me, as judging from the formation and situation, I had expected to find the stalactite cave. Crystals are formed by the action of water on various kinds of minerals, and it was certain that we were now under the bed of the bay. When I looked up and saw the height of this portion of the cave, I shuddered to think how the crust of the earth must have been that thin between us and the great volume of water. From the top and sides of the cave, water was constantly dripping, which formed a small rivulet that flowed through the center of the cave. Without doubt, it ran in the ancient course of the subterranean river. Looking ahead, we could see that the cave was divided into innumerable compartments, so that the river must have been very much broken up in its underground course. Following the winding of the little stream, we continued our exploration and found new wonders awaiting us at every step. Suddenly, the flash of our torches lit up the world of crystalline splendor. We were in the midst of a solid mass of glass-like magnificence. Innumerable transparent columns were suspended from the crystal-fretted ceiling. On all sides could be seen forms of tabloids, columns, and altars, all of the same clear material. Behind a large altar in one apartment, the stalactites combined to form a row of columns resembling the pipes of an organ. In some places in the roof, there were no stalactites, but instead calcareous incrustations of a pure white and glittering like snow. The crystals of other minerals also varied in appearance of the white lining, so that here and there could be seen patches of red, green, purple, and blue shining like myriads of pieces of stone. The iridescent scintillations of the crystals dazzled and puzzled the view, and twinkled while in the distance, brought in clear through the gloom, like stars low on the horizon of a dark wintry sky. All this combined, when it was lit by our torches, to form a scene of stones that were almost 8 feet long and 3 feet high. The blocks were piled almost to the ceiling in rows with narrow aisles between them. All the piles were high above our heads. An idea struck me. We hastened back to the apartment that we first discovered. I found, as I suspected, that had been dug out of a comparatively recent period. The race of men was constructed. It did not have sufficient time to fill it with stone blocks before they ceased to exist. In the far end of the apartment, there were several high piles of stone. At last, I found one block that had been lying alone on the floor. The idea of breaking the lid with a larger rock suggested itself to me. My companion soon found a piece of granite in the cave that weighed about 30 pounds. I had no doubt that we could accomplish our purpose if we could manage to drop the piece of granite on the top of the lid from the high pile. We had a long and stout piece of rope and fastened it securely on the other side. My companion then climbed up the rope hand over hand to the top. I fastened the end of the rope to the piece of granite. I then climbed up to the top of the pile myself. Together, we raised the stone to where we stood. To drop it on the lid was an easy task, and to my great joy, it smashed into a number of pieces. A sickening odor was immediately emitted. We lowered ourselves as soon as possible to continue our investigation. As I supposed, the block proved to be a stone coffin in which the dead had been hermetically sealed after being embalmed. The coffin was full of a black, grimy, and very ill-smelling substance. It was probably a combination of honey, wax, and spices, such as was used by the ancient Egyptians, Persians, and Assyrians for preserving the dead. I scraped a large portion of it with a fragment of stone, and the outer covering of a human body was revealed. My examination of the contents of the coffin was cut short at this time, as I could not possibly proceed further. The pungent and aromatic stench was suffocating and insufferable. We hastened into the apartment to get a breath in a distant part of the cave, and did not return. Just before our flight, I noticed a triangular piece of slate lying in the gum on the other side of the coffin. I picked it up and put it away. To my delight, it proved to have characters chiseled on its surface. I brought this piece of slate with me, and with me, one exception, a few stalactites. It is the only evidence that I possess of my underground exploration. At this moment, the professor took a package from the table and carefully began to remove its wrapper. A dark triangular piece of slate was revealed, each side of which was about 8 inches long. The thickness was about half an inch. And on one surface, there was a number of wedge-shaped characters that seemed to be scattered around promiscuously. The characters on the other side resembled Indian picture writing or Egyptian hieroglyphics. I now recall the fact that the Egyptians and other ancient nations regarded animals as sacred and preserved their bodies with as much care as those of human beings. Inscriptions will no doubt be found on the sarcophagi, the deciphering of which will require months and years of careful study. I shall now give in rude outline the chief revelations that have made my discovery. It is certain that a race of men existed at least 5,000 years ago. They, without a doubt, had some connection in origin, at least, with the Egyptians or other nations of the eastern half of the older continent. The similarities in the modes of preserving the dead clearly proves analogy in their religious beliefs. It is my belief that this ancient American race had reached equal in civilization and arts to that of the Egyptians in their most advanced period. They were far superior to the Aztec race of Mexico, and also far superior to them in civilization. There is no doubt that they were extinct long before either the Aztec or the Indian races made their appearance. Anthropologists have long since suspected the existence of such a race, but no proof of it ever came to light until I made the startling discovery in the cave under the city. My brief investigation proved to me that this prehistoric race had a more effective way in preserving the body than the Egyptians. We now have a very good photograph taken from mummies of ancient Egyptian faces and figures, and I have no doubt that further investigation in the cave will show us the exact form and features of an American race that passed out of existence thousands of years ago. To the students of geology, anthropology, archaeology, paleontology, mineralogy, and kindred sciences, it will open up a wider field of research than it was hoped would ever be found on this continent. When I arrived in San Diego, I was surprised at the great number of wonderful attractions and evidences of the lavish land of nature. I then began to have misgivings as to my ability to discover new wonders in a land already so rich in them. The fact that my labors and researches revealed to me the existence of the cave long before I came to the state of California. Nature, it seems, has exhausted herself in crowding attractions into this favored sunset land where the circle of the world's civilization is complete. I am all impatience from curiosity and a desire for the advancement of science to continue my investigation into the cave. At present, I have neither the power nor the authority to proceed. After I reach Washington, I shall obtain the necessary apparatus and aid and go on with the work as soon as possible. In the meantime, I hope you will keep your promise and not give the least hint of this to the public till I grant you permission. My health is feeble, and I feel so exhausted that I fear I cannot say more at this time. I think I have related everything of interest so that when the proper time comes, you can give the full details to the public. The reporter made the required promise, and after thanking the professor for his wonderful revelations, departed. This is Stephen Sindoni in closing. Sindoni says, American history is no longer a mystery. Thanks for listening. Till next time.